put the spotlight then on multi-stage venture capital firm Lightspeed India Venture Partners. They've invested in several unicorns, the likes of ShareChat, Innovator, Razorpay, as well as Udaan, and have been focusing on the Indian market closely, investing in the country for the last 15 years. So let's find out what some of the top themes are in the future, what it is that they look at before putting in money, and what the outlook is on India as an investment destination. Rahul Taneja, as a partner at Lightspeed India, now joins us on the show. Rahul, thanks so much for taking time out. Just walk us through then what the outlook is on India as a market currently, at a time when we're looking at large investors reducing their investments in the country, at a time when we're looking at this funding winter as well. Is India still standing out as a bright spot?
Thanks, Avanne, for having me on the show. As Lightspeed, we started investing in the country way back in the late 2000s. So we've been around for more than 15 years. This is truly long-term patient capital. So for us, we are not bothered by cycles that happen in investing and in startups. I think as long-term investors, we are very, very bullish about the future of the ecosystem here in the country. We would like to believe that India is still in the very early stages of its digital transformation. This is going to be a multi-decade journey. And therefore, there are so many sectors and verticals where this transformation is happening. Starting from consumer businesses to fintech, to SaaS, to commerce businesses. You pick a business and you'll see brave, bold new founders building out companies which are disrupting sort of existing practices, right? So as long-term investors, we believe there is no better time to be investing than now.
No better time to invest. And of course, you guys are betting big on the country as a whole. Now, some interesting sectors, emerging sectors, climate, electric mobility, deep tech, Web3. That's where you guys are looking at as a potential investment. Can you just tell us a little bit more about why the space appeals to you and what kind of investments you're looking to make and what you have made in this space currently?
Right. Look, one of the large parts of our investing is in what we would like to call as emerging sectors. Now, whether you think of it as climate or infrastructure or mobility, all of these fall under this specific bucket of emergent sectors. There is a global and an India-specific trend line of people wanting to move to more sustainable living. This is reflected both in consumer ownership, consumer practices, as well as on a B2B scale, right? So therefore, we think there is a very, very clear trend line and therefore an opportunity to build out businesses which are riding on these trend lines. Specifically, you could look at maybe 3 or 4 different sort of vectors here, one of which is mobility. Now, even within mobility, you could think of mobility as becoming an OEM or becoming a company which is serving some of these OEMs. Last year, we invested in a company called Exponent Energy, which is in the battery management space. That's just one of the many investments that we have progressively made in the sector.
There's also then the fund that you have, which looks at seed to Series B companies. What sectors is that primarily focused on? And can you just tell us a little bit more about the company profile that you would really look at, or what is it that strikes you before actually signing that check?
Right. In India, we are today a multi-stage fund. We are a large platform which starts investing in companies at the very earliest of stages, which is from seed onwards and all the way until pre-IPO, right? So specifically in the early stage venture fund, which is where we would invest all the way up to, let's say, a Series B, we look for 3 things specifically. One is the company or the startup building in a space which is very large? And when I say very large, in terms of consumer impact, in terms of revenue pools and margin pools, that is, the largeness of that space determines how large a company somebody can possibly build in that, right? That's number one. The second is, what is the unique differentiation a company is able to bring in terms of its proposition? which is very different versus the incumbents, or in many cases, the incumbent may not even be there. It could be a category creation bet. But most importantly, what we look at is who are the founders and what gives them the right to win in that market. So these are three things that we essentially look for. And as Lightspeed, we love to spend time with founders, understanding them, their motivations, what they're building, and that gives us really the confidence to invest in some of these companies.
So Rahul, what's the outlook in terms of the total AUM that you have in India and Southeast Asia, and how much are you looking to allocate in India over the next few years as a percentage of the total portfolio?
Right. Look, in the India Southeast Asia region, over the last few years, Lightspeed has invested upwards of $1.5 billion already. In the most recent cycle in 2022, we raised our fourth India-specific early-stage fund, which is $500 million. As well as on the growth side, we continue to invest out of a large global pool of growth capital, which Lightspeed Ventures has raised for deploying across countries. So I would say our belief is that for the right kind of company and the right kind of founders, should we choose to partner with them, at least the journey is starting right at the early stages from seed. And in the past, we spent on an average more than 8 to 9 years with companies where we've been invested.
Okay, fair enough. Just looking outside of these themes, I understand that supply chain, sectors that are related to electronics, apparel, logistics, etc., that which saw disruption during the pandemic has opened up a lot of opportunities. What is it that you're looking at over here?
There are two things that are, extremely interesting at this point for India and for the Southeast Asia region. The first is disruption of supply chains during COVID meant that buyers and users and customers across the world have decided to de-risk themselves by adding new sources of supply, right? In addition, the government has specifically been making effort over the last 4 to 5 years into ramping up manufacturing across the country. And therefore, these two trend lines have, meant that Indian manufacturing and Indian exports have taken off like never before, right? And therefore, our belief is that there are many subsectors where, where we are as a country in a natural position of advantage, thanks to either sourcing of raw material or the availability of high quality labor, or incentives, right? And therefore, as Lightspeed, we've ended up investing in multiple of these companies which are looking at manufacturing and even within manufacturing, more cross-border supply chains. The earliest of which, and one of the very large companies in this space today is Zetwork. And over the course of last, I will say 18 months, we've gone on to invest in another 4 companies in spaces as varied as construction materials to specialty chemicals to apparel.
Okay, fair enough. Let's also get in a sense as to, what it was that you guys really identified before us, tapping into those now unicorns like a ShareChat or a Razorpay or Udaan. What was the thinking process behind some of them? Is there any particular memory maybe about one of these companies in particular that stood out according to you?
The most important thing, and hindsight is 2020. The most important thing is to be in business with founders who are really special. And what special means is people who are passionate about a specific problem statement, who recognize that they want to build in a very large market, and very importantly, people who are perseverant because they know that this journey is not going to be a straight line. In all of the cases that you mentioned, whether it's a ShareChat or an Udaan or a Zetwork or a Darwinbox or many of these companies, right? The most important thing that has that has really given us confidence and we have seen work is the high quality of founders that have attempted these businesses. And as venture investors, that is really the job that we are in, which is to be in partnership with the best founders across the region.
Fair enough. So that's really the secret sauce before investing in some of those companies. What's the view then when it comes to as well looking at the opportunity of cross-border commerce as well? Manufacturing as a theme is really picking up in India. How do you think companies within this space can really leverage that opportunity as well, given that at a time like this, we don't really have large-scale factories like we do overseas, like in China, for instance?
Great question. And I am personally very, very passionate about this space. The interesting thing is, as you rightly said, Indian manufacturing has historically not been set up for scale. Now, you can leave out a few examples like, maybe steel or cement or many of these large infrastructural manufacturing companies or sectors. But if you look at manufacturing at large, India has a ton of small to mid-sized manufacturers. Many of these manufacturers may not be exporting directly, but they are in turn supplying to people who are doing the final assembly or who are the next level exporters out of the country, right? So I would say even within small and mid-sized manufacturers, the capability to manufacture high quality goods exists. They do not have access to export markets. They do not have access to customers. And there is a very cumbersome cross-border logistics process that none of them have the time or the money to invest into, right? And as a result, there are many companies that are coming up who are trying to solve these two problems for these manufacturers, which is A, creating access to customers across the world, and B, solving for logistics.
All right, let you go on that note. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining in.
Thank you.